Let's talk to Caroline.
Okay.
What's your story, Caroline?
Gosh. Well, so I don't know. I think I learned how. I don't know when I learned how to swim. I was trying to think about it this morning, and I don't know how old I was. I was pretty young. But I know it was very important to my parents that me and my brother that we learned how to swim. Um, and we went to day camp, which I think is like a really northeastern thing. I don't know if that's everywhere. And my mom worked at the camp so that we could go, and we had private swim lessons. And then I joined my swim team when I was 8, and I swam from 8 to 14. And I worked very hard, but I was not particularly talented. I think I peaked, like I went to, like that was in the finals at JOs and like when I was 10. That was kind of like
Ooh.
good as it got. Um, and yeah, so then I stopped swimming when I was 14. And even though like I lifeguarded from 16 like forward, I never got in the water. I didn't swim at all until I was maybe like 29. And I started running, and then I started training for a triathlon, and then I needed to get back in the pool. And so I was doing my dissertation fieldwork in New York City, and I needed to belong to a gym to train for the triathlon. So I started lifeguarding again, and then I met people who were open water swimmers through that job, and I started swimming down at Coney Island in Brooklyn, and sort of went from there.
Mhm. Will you tell us when you found out that you were deaf, or did you lose your hearing when you were like younger, or is it something that you were born with?
Um, I think as far as we know, like this has kind of been like an always thing. I'm like a little older than, when we had sort of screening tests, like that sort of uniform thing. I had a bunch of surgeries when I was like 2, 3 on my ears, and I think the thought was it would like improve things, and it definitely didn't. And so it's just kind of always been.
Yeah, so yeah, got it. Um, how was All right. Well, I want to hear your swimming story, but I'm amazed at your accomplishments without. Well, I'm amazed at your accomplishments, period. But trying to swim and not being able to hear is something we might touch on a little bit more. But tell us about when you started pushing distances.
So I had never heard of marathon swimming growing up. It wasn't like really part of my like it's nothing that I knew about. And when I was 14, I was asked to be part of a relay swimming from England to France and back. And I knew nothing about the English Channel, but it sounded really cool. And, a relay is not a marathon swim, at an individual level, but that was sort of, I guess, my first exposure to marathon swimming. And but it was really just the English Channel specifically. It was a great experience. We went over, we met Allison Streeter, we broke our records, we did all that. But like, it was never introduced as in like, this is a whole sport where people do multiple things. It was like,
Mhm.
a thing. You swim the English Channel. And I had started fencing the year before, and I knew that like I was so much better. I have no idea why I was chosen for this relay. I still don't. Like because I wasn't amazing, right? But I really liked it a lot more than pool swimming, and I felt like, well, now we have this world record, and I'm not even going to be like a college swimmer, so I should like cut my losses now. I'm so much better at fencing. I'm going to concentrate on fencing so I can do that in college. So I ended up doing that. I fenced in high school and throughout college, and stopped swimming at that point. So then when I was working at the JCC, lifeguarding and doing my field work, and I started going to the beach. The person who invited me to the beach was Bonnie Nolan, so then Bonnie Schwartz, and it turned out she was a channel swimmer as well. So I think it was like pretty natural at that point that at some point I would say, oh, well, I'm going to do that, you know?
Yeah.
So it was just, I signed up for the English Channel without having ever done any open water like events. And then sort of figured out a plan of how I was going to get there. And then through that plan, you know, and the events that I signed up for and the people that I met, you know, on the way to the English Channel ended up sort of committing to other swims.
Yeah.
And it's kind of continued in the same vein, you know?
Yeah. Can you tell us some of the like barriers you kind of faced initially when you like in signing up for events and then eventually solo swims? What are some of the barriers you faced being a deaf individual?
I think that I don't think there are many barriers in terms of the actual swims themselves. I don't think there's a barrier in doing the swim, like in the actual sport. I think probably everybody knows that Gertrude Ederle, the first woman to swim in the English Channel, was deaf. There's like a long history there. I think that my experience on marathon swims is probably greatly different than many other people's, but then again, everybody has a different experience out there, you know. Also, I think, for example, I rely on my crew for different things. I think more for some things and less for other things than like a hearing swimmer would. But I think that the main barriers in the sport are really in a lot of the stuff that surrounds the swims. I don't tend to do organized events. I do solo swims. There are like a lot fewer barriers there. People, just because of the assumptions of organizers in the sports, you know, that everyone is a middle class, white, male, you know,
Hearing.
and when people are sort of confronted with the reality that that is not the case, a lot of the times they don't react as they should. So just a lot of I think that, like, I mean, something about the sport that's so important to me is the social aspect of it. And most of the swims that I do is because I met someone and I want to go visit them or something like that at an individual level. But a lot of the more organized social aspects of the sport have been very exclusive and excluding. And a lot of, you know, like when there's any kind of media that comes out, all the films that come out, they're never accessible. And it's something that I have made it a practice of always asking for those things to be made accessible. And I think, you know, that's something that I've chosen to do, but when you do that, you're often made to feel very annoying, or like at the best case, like you're asking for a personal favor. And the thing is that it's not a personal favor. You're not asking for something extra. You're asking for equal access, not only for you, but to make something accessible for everyone out there and to open the sport to other people who might come across it that way. So.
Yeah. I love you. Thanks for talking about that. What do you think was the motivation? Like, what is it about marathon swimming why do you keep wanting to swim marathons?
I think so. It's very much driven by the people that I've met. So like I was saying, you know what, I don't think it would have occurred to me to swim marathons if I hadn't met Bonnie. And then as I was training for it, I met all these people who inspired me to do other swims. So when I was training for the channel, I had to do my 6-hour qualifier swim, and I ended up meeting these guys from Italy on a training trip in Cinque Terre. But it's also a really good excuse to travel. And so I met these guys in Italy from swimming, and decided, you know, at that point I decided that I wanted to swim the North Channel. And, you know, I keep meeting, every time I go over to Ireland, I meet more wonderful people, which is why I keep going back. And then sort of across the board, it's like, that's why I end up like continuing to sign up for swims. I'm not a list person. I don't do swims to check off a list. I do swims that mean something to me, either because they're local or they're somewhere I want to be or with someone I want to be with. So.
That's awesome. How do you describe the feeling of completing a marathon swim?
Um, I don't know that like I have a great answer for this because I don't know that I like particularly let it hit me. Like each ending is kind of different. Like a lot of the times, if you have rough conditions and you just have to like kind of grab onto some rock and you hope you don't, get too cut up. And if it's dark, I'm always really concerned that like I need to know that the boat has seen me finish. And I'm always like, I'm hanging on there extra long. Like, I really hope this is like something that they are aware that I finished. Um, I had a funny experience in on my first North Channel swim in 2016. I finished, and it was like the whole last like couple hours of the swim were like very much a surprise that they were happening at all because I was very close to finishing like several hours ahead of that. And then I ended up somewhere else several hours later in the dark finishing. And everything that I've seen about North Channel finishes is like it's a rocky coastline, and I knew that I was close to land because I had seen some random light, and I assumed that I was heading for some kind of like a headland, and I didn't know where the closest spot to touch was going to be, except that then sort of the shore rose up and I was on a sandy beach, and like the light was these guys having a bonfire and drinking beer. It was so unexpected.
Yeah.
So that really varies, but I don't know. I think like that, assuming you have the conditions to do it, like that short little like paddle back to the boat is such a nice like relief. You're swimming, but there's no pressure. And but it's also tempered by I really hate the boat ride back. And like this is no matter what the swim is. It's just very physically uncomfortable. I don't feel like it's really like a time to celebrate. It's such a like whether or not you were cold in the swim, you have like with the increased speed, like you have all this wind coming at you, and you've just done all this activity, and now you're like you're stuck in one position, you're going to be really sore afterwards. It's like bumpy. It's just like the definition of uncomfortable. I think like it's a good reason to shoot for a two-way event.
Double crossing, yeah, that's it. That's your reason, is do the double so you don't have to ride the boat back.
Yeah.
Do you get like have physical like recovery? I mean, I know like you're cold, so do you shivering, but have you ever had other symptoms after long swims?
Yeah, no, I have not done much shivering either. And I think some people don't, and it's not a good thing. It's not like, oh, I'm less cold than other people. I think shivering is a natural physical response that I don't seem to have. Although I've shivered in like cold parking lots, but like not attached to swimming. It's very weird. But no, I haven't been injured, thank God. I will often come out of the water like bleeding somewhere from like a rocky finish, or like even just climbing on the boat, and usually you're cold, you don't actually like you don't feel it that much, and then you look and you have this blood, but it's just like waiting to get back to shore.
Yeah. Can you tell us about the swim you're most proud of?
Sure. I think I think that the 2000, like my first attempt at the double North Channel is probably one that I'm most proud of, even though it was not ultimately successful. I think, and it's not for any like historical reasons, like this is the first time someone attempted this, because I think that's silly until you finished it. But I think for me, it was a swim where at that point, like it took on the aspect of a project, and you, as opposed to like, I'm going to swim, I want to swim the English Channel, I'm going to hire a boat captain and I am the customer and I'm going to swim, there's like a different relationship when you are doing something this individual, where it becomes you really take ownership of the project. And so in 2017, we've been planning the two-way, and nothing really gets discussed like in too much depth till you're over there, and you're planning it out, and we have these terrible conditions, and I'm sitting there for like weeks waiting for a window, and it wasn't happening. And when we went out, we knew we didn't have great conditions. It was something, you know, I was fully informed of, and I made the decision to go. And it just felt very like epic. I don't know. I like kind of rough conditions. I like conditions in which I can finish also. So I, you know, there's a balance there, but it was my first time swimming over 24 hours. It was, I don't know, I think I was like proud of the way that I handled things on that swim also. It was the first time that I didn't finish a swim that wasn't an event swim that got canceled, because that happened several times my first season. Like the entire event was canceled while we were in the water. But and it was not a situation where like I don't believe in, you know, this idea that you should swim till you die. You know, it was a logical decision that this was not going to happen, and we had made a good stab at it, and this was not, you know, I think I'm proud of the fact, you know, I held up well the whole way, and was in control of that decision. So
yeah. So is there, I guess, I love how you describe in a couple of your interviews, and the way you did just now, how you describe, you know, it was a logical decision to finish. And at this point, I usually ask the question, you know, like, what did you learn from a DNF or from something you haven't finished? So do you feel like there's anything that you would take into to a next attempt?
So actually, that was my first attempt at that swim. It was not my last attempt at that swim. I actually think that, you know, I mean, not that there wasn't anything to learn, but like, I don't think it was finishable on that day. I don't think there was like I'm pretty comfortable with the fact that there was not like a personal failing involved in that swim. I went back in 2018 and tried again. And I ended up also not finishing. And I think the main reason behind that was I was just like full of a lot of jellyfish. I was much more stung up than I had been in previous swims. And I didn't know, like from personal experience, you know, exactly what that felt like. And given that what I didn't know, I think it was a good decision for me to get out. But now that I know that, I don't think I would make that decision again. Like, I don't think I was in any danger. It was not like something where I required medical attention afterwards. But it was like, you know, I thought I was experiencing, you know, cold, etc. And it was really about like the venom. And I don't know, I'm very conservative where it comes to not actually much of a risk taker with swims. I am like, people are always surprised that I don't do a lot of winter swimming, and like I dabble in it, but I'm very much like a dabbler, and I show up and I don't sign up for the long event, and people are like, you know, and then I say, well, let's go swimming, and they say, oh, you can swim as long as you want, and I say, I'm sure you will swim longer than I do when I get out. And I've never been really cold after a winter swim, because I get out as soon as I think that like that there could be, you know, like I don't know what I'm feeling, so I'm not comfortable with this. And that's fine, but it's also something to learn from, in that like, so the next time you know what that is and you can push it further. And it's the same with, you know, I mean, obviously traveling halfway across the world, and, you know, and then swimming for 27 or 28 hours to get to the point where then you learn that lesson is a little bit like of a harsher lesson, but I wouldn't stop the next time, and it's something that I learned. But there's something different every time, which is what's so great about our sport.
Exactly. Yeah. Can you tell us about, I personally haven't been full of lion's mane jellyfish venom. Can you tell us what the recovery is like from a lot of stings like that, like you faced in that second attempt?
Sure. I mean, I think also this is very individual, and I think Elaine could probably tell you about this like just as well or better than I can. But I have come to believe that maybe I have like a pretty good tolerance for them.
Superpower.
I've been stung on every North Channel swim that I've done, and it's never been an issue until the last time. And that was, I don't know that I really had an issue, but because I actually hadn't experienced the same symptoms, it was, so I think it's really individual. So your mileage may vary. What I can say is that it's uncomfortable for 24 hours afterwards. And so for some people, like there are definitely people who have like ended up with major medical problems from this. So I don't mean to minimize this in any way, because so if you're having a medical problem, please go get it taken care of. But like assuming that is not the case, the normal sort of skin level, symptoms and discomfort take about 24 hours to process, right? And you feel like first you feel particular symptoms at like your extremities, like like your forearms and your ankles, and I've heard your groin. I don't know. So you experience that in the water as like actually a sensation of increased cold, but then it kind of burns afterwards. It's like itchy, it's stingy. I've heard that hot water, some people say that hot water is a good solution for afterwards. It'll help, bring out some of the proteins that are in the venom, or denature them in any case. I'm not sure if it's true or not, but like it goes away in 24 hours. And I think it's really good to think about that.
Keep your eye on the prize. Interesting. Thank you for explaining that to us. What motivates you to keep going?
Interesting. So I think in general, like, what motivates me to keep swimming is definitely, I'm like a little bit like I sign up for something and that's what motivates me. Like it's the fact that I have the swim coming up that motivates me. But then during the swim itself, I don't think I rely on motivation at all. I think it's much more of for me, it's like a decision-based model. Like I have taken all these steps to get here and I have decided that I am not getting out until I'm done. So I don't swim and think about, the moment when I finish, because I don't know what that looks like. So much as just, I don't entertain the thought of not swimming while I'm swimming,
Yeah. Can you tell us about one of your favorite swimming memories?
Gosh. What then? I mean, I think that training trip in Italy was amazing. I think, well, it ended badly. We all got sick. But I don't know. I think, for me, Coney Island is like a really special place to swim. And I think it's unbelievable, being in New York City, but also being at the beach at the same time. And, the normal sort of basic route is you meet at Brighton Beach and you swim to Coney Island, which is, a mile this way. And just like being in the water and seeing, the cyclone and the parachute jump, those are sort of like amazing moments, and just the community that's on the beach there. Yeah.
What advice would you have for aspiring marathon swimmer?
Ooh, this is a good one, because actually I think my advice would be to never be shy about asking for help, like individual help, but actually to be very wary of people who are eager to give out blanket advice. Because I see this like a lot, and I think that there are people who are out there who are willing to prescriptively say, this is how you do X. And I think that the people who are probably most qualified to help, and I'm not necessarily saying I'm most qualified, but like you just notice that people who are experienced in the sport are very gracious in giving advice when asked personally and in context of what you mean for yourself and your swims, or else they're very conscious of putting things in terms of their own experience. But solutions that say, you know, you should feed on, this is what you should, you know, take in during your swims, or this is how you should train. The people who are giving that kind of advice are maybe misguided. I don't know. And that's my advice, would be to avoid that. Because really, I think the constant is that there is no, like, we all want to go from A to B, but how we get there is so varied. And I think that would be a really important thing to keep in mind, that like, if somebody tells you that you have to train this much a week and that's not working for you, that's okay. Maybe, you know.
Yeah, that's really, really great advice. I appreciate that. How do you think that marathon swimming can be more inclusive?
I think that this is so hard. We've been talking about this a lot, and I think that to some extent, you know, this is a really individual sport, and the way that, you know, I think the model that I see, especially, you know, at the marathon sort of level, the model that I see in general and that like I experienced has been, and I think is very effective, is just sort of, you know, very like individual mentorship and bringing people, you know, inviting friends personally, you know, to be part of things. But in terms of, you know, as the sport grows, and as, you know, and just sort of regarding open water swimming at a broader level, to the extent that there are, you know, events and sort of infrastructure surrounding it, I think that like it would be very helpful for, you know, not even like, forget checking your privilege, right? It needs to be done too. But I think the first thing that people are missing is that to just examine our assumptions, you know, between, you know, about who is an open water swimmer. And, you know, like, it's been great traveling around the world and meeting all these people, and like, it's a privilege to be able to do so. But what you do see is that in other places outside of the US, you know, open water swimming is actually, like in the UK and in Ireland, you know, partially because of the geography, it's so much more democratic, and I'm sure they have their own issues, but it's much more inclusive, I find. And I'm sure there are people excluded, but there are so many more people included, and who open water swims and who is involved in the sport looks a lot different than, you know, what our baseline assumption is here in the US. And I think that I think it would be a big help just to start to take a look at what is our assumption and why is it that way, and what, you know, how can we be open to change.
That's fabulous. Great response. I admire you so much, and I could ask you a million questions, but we got to close it out. Can you tell us whose marathon swim story you want to hear?
Yeah, so I know it's early for you guys on the West Coast, but I think there are all these fabulous ladies out in California that I would love to hear from that we haven't yet. You know, Amy Gubser, Robin Rose, Rainey Pierce. There's also Arlene Gonzalez in Mexico City, who is like a powerhouse swimmer and just a really sweet person. I think it would be interesting I don't know her personally, so I don't know if she's open to this at all, but I think it would be interesting to hear from Sandra Fimmerman Bergquist. I think a lot of us here are like completers, and that's great. I love that about our sport, but she is, if you don't know, she's in the marathon swimming community, but she has been really trying to make a move towards competitive, you know, racing events. And I would just love to know, you know, the mindset behind that and what goes into, you know, how she does those swims, you know, with that in mind. There are a lot of people in Ireland I'd love to hear from. I think Jared Kennedy is someone he's a riot to talk to, but he also has like a really broad range of experience, like in and around the water. He's a really accomplished ice swimmer, but he's also a really accomplished marathon swimmer. Like about half the time that I spend with him has been, you know, when we're crewing for people. He's like so supportive of everyone on the water. I think he'll be great to hear from.
You might have to send me the full list. That was a big list, but I thank you for the recommendations. Okay. It's been so wonderful talking today, Caroline. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.